Meher Baba says, God does not listen to the language of the tongue, which constitutes japs, mantras, zikr, and devotional songs. He does not listen to the language of the mind, which constitutes meditation, concentration, and thoughts about God. He listens only to the language of the heart, which constitutes love. The most practical way for the common man to express this language of the heart whilst attending to daily life duties is to speak lovingly, think lovingly, and act lovingly towards all mankind, irrespective of caste, creed, and position, taking God to be present in each and everyone.
The topic today is consciousness of nations. I think we can answer that question if we wanted to in 2 words. Yes, there is a consciousness of nations, and yet nations have karma. Good night. But we are going to, again, go under the hood and look at it a little more. And to do that, we need to look at this structure of creation, which our beloved Baba has so carefully described for us in God Speaks. And it is all based on sanskaras. The sanskaric fibers, the impressions, are the basis of what we find in God Speaks. And he begins the discussion on the first page by saying that, well, we are all one, we are all in the oversoul. And then why is it that it looks like we are different? He says there are differences in consciousness, in the plane, in the experiences, and in the state. Why is it? And he answers, he said, the cause of this difference is that the souls have different and diverse impressions, sanskaras. So we are going to work our way all the way up to how the individual consciousness contributes to the consciousness of these larger structures like nations and families and other organizations in general. So and then we are also going to kind of put that in the context of what is the goal. Of course, the goal is to purify sanskaras and to return them to their source. And we are all agents here. All of creation is an agent to purify sanskaras and return them. And that's where the rub is, as they say, where the difficulty is. And so we, as you know, we collect sanskaras during the winding phase of the opposite. And then unwinding begins. And when that happens, we are set on fire. Literally, you're set on fire. Of course, for lifetimes and eons, we pray for a time when we will be cleansed and purified. But then when the time comes, after having, done our best to please the beloved and to earnestly do the best we can, when that time comes when we are to be purified and major cleansing begins, as I said, you're set on fire. It brings with it a most difficult period, which is very anguishing and most challenging. Nevertheless, that is what we have prayed for. And when it comes, we have forgotten that that's what we prayed for. We thought it was all going to be in a bed of roses, and Baba assured us that that's not the case. So all of that pent-up learning of the opposites come together, blend together, and become this amorphous blob, an undifferentiated, unfamiliar, and very confusing and alarming, forceful energy that bursts to the front of our consciousness. And we're not ready for it. We have experienced the opposite, but not the blending of the opposite, not when they come together. And so we are overwhelmed with anxiety and with fear, with worry. And we don't want it to go away, because if it goes away, then they won't burn. So we just have to get good at handling that. And we have talked about that a little bit. We'll touch on it a little more today. So one of the things that happens to many people is that when that burning happens, when that cleansing happens, it is accompanied by a lot of tears. A good example of that, well documented, is January 1st, 1928, on Meherabad Hill, when suddenly this divine force descended and began to impact and affect the boys of the Brahmashram. And of course, these forces are there to cleanse, and so the sanskaras were coming to the surface to be cleansed and burned. And so what happened was that the children started to cry very loudly, wailing, and it was such a big ruckus that people from the village started to come over to see what is going on, what is happening. It was that dramatic. The crying and the tears were that dramatic. And of course, we have examples of our beloved Baba. I mentioned one last time of when Baba was preparing his mandali and burning their sanskaras, processing their sanskaras through his own body, that he would get extremely violently ill and he would shed tears. And we talked about how one day Adi climbed up to see Baba, who was secluded in the water tank up on the hill, and found Baba crying. And then we also have the account of Chota Baba, who told Meherji that when he insisted that he wanted to stay in Iran, while Baba wanted him to continue with him for a little bit longer, but he just couldn't do it any longer. So at that time, Baba shed tears. And there are other times as well that Baba shed tears. So tears are not unfamiliar to those who are undergoing these periods of cleansing and purification. And so when these periods descend on us, it feels like Baba has forgotten us, that God has forsaken us. And we also spoke about it in terms of a period of void where suddenly we don't have any place to stand on. All the things that we believed in, all the things that gave our life stability, all the values, they're suddenly gone. They're all kind of melted away as the ego begins to dissolve. And these opposing sanskaras begin to come together to burn away. And so it's like a free fall. You don't have any place to hang on to. And so it's a very desperate state. If you feel like you've gone to the gates of hell, and I'm not exaggerating, that's the way it can feel, depending on how forcefully that may be in your case and for how long it may last, which is, of course, variable by each person. And again, there are those who have done that many times, and now they are taking a break from it. So it doesn't mean that those who are having a kind of a vacation from it are spared it. They have done it and they'll do it again, but now they're getting a respite. Now, there is a lovely poem that captures this sense of abandonment of God that one feels that many of you are probably familiar with, but I thought it would be helpful to read it again and remind ourselves of how to orient ourselves towards these periods. It's a poem by Margaret Fishback Powers. It goes like this. One night I dreamed a dream. I was walking along the beach with my Lord, and across the dark sky flashed scenes from my life. For each scene, I noticed two sets of footprints in the sand, one belonging to me and one to my Lord. When the last scene of my life shot before me, I looked back at the footprints in the sand. There was only one set of footprints. I realized that this was at the lowest and saddest times of my life. This always bothered me, and I questioned the Lord about my dilemma. Lord, you told me when I decided to follow you, you would walk and talk with me all the way. But I'm aware that during the most troublesome times of my life, there is only one set of footprints. I just don't understand why. When I needed you most, you leave me. He whispered, my precious child, I love you and will never leave you. Never, ever, during your trials and testings. When you saw only one set of footprints, it was then that I carried you. So this feelings of desperation are generated, as we said, because opposites are coming together. We have been used to one of the opposites and the other one of the opposites, but when they come together, that is new. It's confusing. And they bring with them a tremendous amount of force and energy that topples us. And they come to the surface and they blend to balance each other. And the friction of this rubbing of the opposites together is the fire that begins to burn us, and the fear and the agitation that it causes. Now, if we were to look at our spiritual anatomy, as you know, Baba said, the physical structure is built around sanskaric fibers, around sanskaras. It is the sanskaras that determine the shape of the body and everything. And so if we were to look at that inner structure, we would find that the armature, the fibers, the sanskaric fibers, crisscross. They cross each other. And when that happens, there's a point in the middle of the cross where the opposites are coming together. And that center of the cross is where the heat and the friction is generated, because the opposites meet at that point of junction. And as the process of cleansing and purification continues, that junction, that center of the cross, begins to melt and dissolve and leaves a hole. Now, this reminds me of an episode with Bill LePage. Many of you know Bill LePage. He recently passed away, a lovely man. He lived in Australia. He came to Iran one year in the late 70s. And I have a very vivid memory of this particular time when he said what I'm going to tell you. I think we were, for those of you who know Tehran, I think we were near Neovarun, not in Neovarun, but we were just south of Neovarun. And we were walking, I was taking him to show him something. And he said, you know what? One day when I was with Baba, I was standing out on the veranda on Baba House, and Baba called me in. And so I went in, and Baba said, you see my body? I said, yes, Baba. He said, it's full of holes. My body is full of holes. Okay, now you can go. So these are the holes that we're talking about at the cross, center of the cross, where sanskaras burn. And for someone who's all of these sanskaras have burned, like the Avatar or the great masters, they're holy, they're full of holes. And perhaps that's why the word holy has come to the usage. Because literally, when you look at the spiritual anatomy, those who can see these things tell us that this is where holes begin to burn in sanskaric fibers. And of course, the cross has now come to symbolize the Christ, because that is the burning that they do for all of creation. They carry that burden, the burden of the cross, which is the coming together of the opposites and the burning of them. And of course, what we need very strong sanskaras to generate very strong heat so that we can be pushed along, so that the transformation can happen quickly and we can be pushed along. when these tendencies of the past come to the surface to be expressed, when we begin to unwind and these two opposites begin to come to the surface, we have a tendency to act on them. But during unwinding, Baba has asked us not to suppress. So what do? If we can't suppress, we sublimate, which means we raise things higher. And there is a wonderful story that I recently was thinking about it. It's about a very dear friend. And as I was thinking that it might be good to bring this up to our group and present it, a few days later, I learned that she had passed away. So she had just passed away. So I thought that it would be a wonderful way to think of her. Some of you may know her. Her name was Kusum Singh. Kusum Singh and Mukam Singh were Rajas, were from the Raja families in the north of Delhi. Well, they settled in Delhi and they ran the Baba group there. And they would come to Meherabad and Meherzad often, and many of you may have met them there. But Kusum's mother is the one whom you see in 1962 doing Baba's arti. She has an arti tray with fire and all the other things that are part of the ceremony, and he is doing Baba's arti in the East-West gathering in one of those sessions. So the story is about that lady, the mother of Kusum Singh. And Erich used to tell this story with great relish. And the way I came across it recently was a bit different than the several times that I heard Erich tell this story. So I'm going to tell you the version that I heard from Erich. He said that one day that when they were up north in Dehradun, they had a neighbor who was this Raja, this lady that I talked about with the tray and all that. And they lived next, they were neighbors. And so one day she came to see Baba, and she fell at Baba's feet crying and saying that, Baba, my daughter has just died, and I can't bear it. Life means nothing to me anymore. Please bring my daughter back. You are God. I know you can do it. Just bring my daughter back. Now, before that, she was not a Baba lover. She had just heard that this holy man, who everybody says is God in human form, is residing next door. So she went asking for her daughter back. And Erich said that Baba said, sure, of course, no problem. You can have your daughter back. And the woman was overjoyed. Really? In the same shape, in the same age, in the same form? Yes, Baba says. Okay, everything. You can have your daughter back. And the woman is just overjoyed and completely believes in Baba, that he can do it. And Baba says, but do one thing. From now on, start to read about me, think about me, and read books and learn more about me and focus on me more and more, and you'll get your daughter back. And so the woman is beside herself and she leaves. And Eric says, here I was standing there very nervously, knowing that Baba never did things like this. And that what was he doing? And I was kind of very nervous and all of that. And Baba said, what's the matter with you? And he said, Baba, what is this thing that you promised to this woman? You're not going to bring her daughter back, the way she was. So why did you promise her that? I said, what? Are you saying that I can't do that? Who do you think I am? So you're God, but Baba, this is impossible. The woman is dead. She is, in the grave. She's rotting away. And you're saying you can bring her? And Baba says, you're good for nothing. You don't know anything. You don't understand anything. I can do everything. I am God. And so Eric, simmers down, and then all the rest of the mandali come in. And Baba tells them that, look at this fellow, meaning Eric, and asks Eric to say what happened. And Eric cries, and Baba says, he doesn't believe that I'm God. He doesn't believe that I can bring this woman back to life. What kind of a disciple is he? And start berating Eric. And so then, they move, and then whenever there was an opportunity, this woman would come to see Baba, and Baba would say, soon, she'll come to you soon. Have you been thinking about me? Have you been focusing on me? Have you been reading about me? And the woman says, yes. And one of those occasions, Baba said, the sign of the fact that it's really soon and she's coming is that you will have a dream of her. When you have a dream of her, then you will know that she's coming. So after that, every time that she would come to see Baba, Baba would say, have you had a dream? Have you had that dream yet? And she would say, no, Baba, I haven't. Baba said, never mind. Soon, you'll have a dream. Then one of these times that she came, it was a beautiful atmosphere, and I think there may have been music or what, and the woman was sitting there by then adoring Baba, and Baba suddenly says, quick, I have a whim to give you what you want. Now, tell me, right this instant, do you want me to bring your daughter back, or do you want me? And the woman, without hesitation, says, I want you. And Baba says, I am your daughter. Your daughter is in me. So now you have your daughter back, and you have me. And so this is a kind of an example that you have this intense feeling of wanting something, wanting her daughter back. And that intensity is sublimated into wanting Baba, wanting God. And so that all of that energy goes towards this higher, loftier, the most sublime want. So that's why Baba said, I don't want, and I'm quoting now, I don't want any repression, but I do want transformation. And that is what happened to this lady. So now let's tie all of these to the consciousness of nations. What does all of that have to do with the consciousness of nations? Well, consciousness is made of matter. of sanskaric fibers and of sanskaras. Sanskaras are impressions, they're things, they're made of matter. Even though the matter is more subtle, more refined, it is matter. And nations are also things because they are made of thingy things. They're made of sanskaric fibers and things. So a nation is not a, we when we think of a nation, we think of a kind of an immaterial concept, that it's some sort of a concept that we have devised for ourselves to kind of better describe our relationships with things. That it's not really a thing, but nations are things, social units, families, tribes, villages, all communal organizations are things made out of matter, although they're refined matter. And they follow the same laws of matter that the human consciousness follows. They're not hypothetical constructs to help us think about things. So what we said about people also in a way holds for nations. We are part of many entities, including our nation. And we are part of the work of our nation. Family units have a structure, and we are members of that unit as well. So we've got ourselves made out of these sanskaric fibers, a structure, family structures, larger organizations, and eventually nations. And we are connected to all of it. As we walk on the street and we pass someone, these fibers connect to other people and they communicate things, though at a level that is below our awareness. So if we can infuse our feelings with love, then what is communicated to others at that subtle level is love. This has to do with what serendipitously dear Mernaz read in the beginning. To love everyone, to spread this love, because it is actually carried to others and to other structures, including to our nation and including to consciousness of our nation. And the consciousness of our nation is built up of all that goes into it from individuals, organizations, and other structures. So that begins to kind of show us a little bit about the responsibilities that we have. And when we learn about these responsibilities, then we feel like we want to do something about it and feel like we are responsible for what happens in our nation. The more positive, loving, optimism we share with others and with our nation, the more uplifted the nation becomes. And of course, nations, as I said, they are structures. And they sometimes creep over and, like an amoeba, and take over another land. And they, you know, they're a living structure. That's what they do, and they devour it. And that is how karma is created for nations. So nations have karma. And nations are associated with certain lands. So we have talked about this before, how the qualities of each land are unique. And we ourselves as individuals are drawn to certain lands because divinity decides that that is the kind of energy that we need for our growth. And so we sometimes stay in one place, sometimes we find our destiny carries us to other places, primarily because of karma, but ultimately for the purposes of balancing our sanskaras, blending them together and purifying them. And so we and our nations have this connection to the lands that we live. And these connections that I spoke about, I first talked about them as these crosses within our own body, but they're everywhere. They're in all of creation. About 50 or 100 years ago, scientists thought that there was empty space, that there was a vacuum in the outer space. But the mystics have always known that there is no empty space. And those who have the sight to see it chock full of these fibers and energies that flow through them and connect everything together. And now, as Baba would have it, even scientists are beginning to talk about not only sanskaric, well, we talk about sanskaric fibers and sanskaric membranes, where these fibers come together and create membranes of sanskaric fibers. But scientists started to talk about membranes in creation that superstrings are tied to. The latest theories of creation suggest that there are these strings, they call them superstrings, and the theory is called string theory. Very similar to what we're talking about in terms of sanskaric. I doubt if there is a one-to-one relationship, but there is probably some relationship between the superstrings that scientists are talking about and the sanskaric fibers that Baba has talked about. I don't know what the relationship is, but it's interesting that they're both talking about fibers and membranes. They call them brains in scientific terminology. They call them brains rather than membranes. branes. So the reason it is important to know about consciousness of our nation is that we are tied to it and we can aid it by simple acts of kindness and love. And I'm hoping that dear Bernaz will read that opening statement once more, that we can contribute and aid by simply adopting a loving attitude. We go to the grocery store, we go to, a driver cuts in front of us, whatever, to try to remember our responsibility and and to be loving. So before we open the forum for questions and comments, Mehersepas, would you mind reading what you read in the beginning again?
Absolutely. The most practical way for the common man to express this language of the heart whilst attending to daily life duties is to speak lovingly, think lovingly, and act lovingly towards all mankind, irrespective of caste, creed, and position, taking God to be present in each and everyone.
Thank you. So that's why we talk about consciousness of nations.